Everybody, welcome back. Developers finally respond to some of this offer nonsense. Let's see what they say, along with some of the balance talk that we've got going on. Are we going to get any improvements, more buffs coming anytime soon? Let's jump in. Before we get into that, if you're wondering about that offer that I just showed, 48% discount. But again, not a lot of value in that unless you're really hoping to roll the dice on a mystery variant, which is likely going to be a pixel. Really hoping after this week that they're done with this, they get the floor of these offers and figure out where they want to set their price at, which again, let's talk about. So we've got a bunch of questions for the developers this week on Snap Zone. Some of these are pretty solid. I'm pretty excited to see them, specifically related to the offers. So let's go through these. You're asking if there's a Pride event in June. Charlene says stays tuned. I'm expecting that will 100% be there, and that's typically in line with Marvel. They like to do a lot of diversity stuff, rightfully so. What is the status of the first edition badges? For the moment they've started it. This one's interesting. It's a semi-balance type thing. Talks about since Arrow's power now affects the last card played. Basically, when Daredevil's out there, it should allow you to see the play order. Glenn Jones says that is currently an intentional obfuscated element of Daredevil. Yeah, I had to Google that word. I'm not that smart. Can you please use a third grade vocabulary? But basically, that's something that's intentional. They don't want that to be shown. They're talking about the nerf watch list. Is there any buff watch list that they're going to announce? And then Glenn says not that they'd like to announce. Okay. So they've got something that they're thinking about buffing. I know that Baron Mordo was out there. Quake was out there. That was obviously something they're looking at. A lot of players feel the last patch was the worst. Since it didn't fix the meta, is Second Dinner doing anything to fix the situation? Now, this is where we start getting into some balance talk. So this one's important. Let's see how Glenn answers. Glenn says, I'm still monitoring the effects of the last patch, and it's only a 2-day sample, but there have been some meaningful shifts. Admittedly, maybe not as many as we would have liked. But we'll review that next week once we get a couple more days of play to examine. So what I want to comment on with this one is I really like that Glenn at least is saying it's not, at least early on, there's not as many shifts as they would like. Now, I personally think that was pretty obvious as far as the Shuri thing. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, this is a buff to Red Skull. What are you doing? And this is all going to be fine for Shuri. It's not going to change anything. Thanos is still top cream of the crop. Well, the tier list, and I didn't cover that this week because I'm like, there were some different decks being used. I was like, I don't feel like this is really a good indication of where the true meta is. So I didn't necessarily want to cover it, but I am happy to see that, Glenn and company here are talking about noticing already that some things aren't changing and that they're going to keep an eye on it for next week. Then there's a question here about Glenn having to tweet about the fact that because people put tokens into Shuri, it's a reason maybe for not changing her. Someone asked, should we expect tokens to be an ongoing influence on balance? Glenn says here, the structure of our game is such that almost all cards cost something, which makes all cards and even their variants usually feel earned. And I'd agree with that. Even early series cards all cost time, which is a valuable resource to all. When we have to nerf, preserving enough functionality and appeal for players who already enjoy playing cards is always the goal. I don't think he necessarily addresses the direct question here. I mean, this is sort of how anybody in media or politics or anything has to sort of answer things. But it's good to see that they're thinking about that a little bit and that they have a goal towards it. Me as a player, I always recognize that there's going to be some issues in trying to get those things properly addressed, but at least they're thinking about it. Next question here, comment is player feedback after Wolverine rework has been extremely well received and nobody's asking for a change. But how do you deal with a situation where a rework like Leader has led to a healthier game at the expense of the card viability or mixed feedback? And if you're not familiar with this, Leader was sort of like the meta, made everything just pointless unless you had Leader. They changed that, which opened up the meta to all these other decks, but Leader is basically trash now. So they're saying, well, how do you balance that? Glenn says, we are still tuning that ourselves. Whenever we change a card, buff or nerf, we aim to retain the core of that was there and or open up something new. The Leader rework aspired to be the latter, but it didn't work out how we'd hoped, even though it accomplished our other goal of increasing the number of viable endgames. So at least they're watching it. We'll see if it's something that they're really going to be able to fix properly. Next comment here or question is, when the token shop was released, many cards were added directly to Series 4. Is there a consideration for more cards to be released this way? Even if they stay in Series 4 longer, it would be more tempting to buy a card for $3K to test its viability than to not interact with it for 2 months waiting on a downgrade. And I think this is a great point because one of the biggest problems I think there's in the game, and I've been doing some currency analysis, which the videos will come later. Like and subscribe if you're interested. But I don't think that they have a great model for really anybody, even big spenders, to get new cards to enjoy them very quickly, which is not a great model for a game and a real good reason why people will just not play or quit. There's someone I knew recently who I just reached out to, and they were a spender, and I said, hey, how are you liking Snap? They said they just uninstalled it. I was like, well, why? And they actually they bought a card. They had some of the new ones, but they didn't pull it. And so I'm like, they definitely need to be able to figure some of this out a little bit, because if it's so hard and then you can never pull it, you just get mad. Now, Steven says their philosophy is to iterate until something is great. We are always watching feedback, playing the game ourselves, and watching data to see how things feel and perform. As the game and card library continues to grow, we will continue assessing when more changes are needed. We are learning a ton about the most recent changes to token acquisition and card acquisition. It has led us to a lot and will continue to lead to a lot of conversations within the halls of Second Dinner. Thank you for all of the feedback. Please keep it coming as you continue to experience the most recent changes. So that's sort of a rubber stamp media type response, but we'll see. How are future cards play tested balanced? Glenn says we use our, and this is actually interesting because I tweeted about this the other day, where I was upset and I saw some other people upset with the whole Kitty Pryde thing, where she wasn't necessarily working as you would have thought she would have right away. There was plenty of bugs. Like, how did they not test this? What the heck? Glenn ended up saying we actually did. And just when you put it out into the world, it just didn't work. So it's unfortunate, but this is a good question about how they actually do it. So Glenn says, we use our own build of the game and aim to have up to 3 seasons rotating through at all times, as well as any determined balance changes. Sometimes we have multiple cards for the same character to find the right one. That part I found very interesting. So they basically, like, maybe Kitty Pryde was in there for 1-0. Maybe she was in there for 2-0. Maybe she was in there for 2-1. Maybe she was in there for 1/2, but only went up 1 energy or 1 power each time you pulled her back. Those sort of things I like, so that they can get a real feel for it and be like, you know, that one's way too overpowered. This one feels about right. Different playtests have different goals and participants, but everyone at the company is welcome and encouraged to playtest. We mix in different featured locations, battle mode versus ranked, and design playtest decks versus self-built ones to ensure we're looking at each design from multiple angles to best gauge its appeal. Feedback from all of our players get reviewed by Snap's core game designers, who make changes and do the final playtest for fine balance. So this is interesting. I think that's about what you'd expect to hear from somebody as far as balancing what they're doing. I would love to have an open playtest, but I also understand where you'd have to sign NDAs and have a lot of that going. They might have that in their content creator program. I'm not sure. I need to build this channel up a bit to even apply for there. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I can keep growing it and maybe apply and get accepted. We'll see. Next question. Why has there been such a downgrade in bundle value recently? So this is one of the things that the thumbnail and the front end of the video was talking about. And it is obvious that they've got some issues with these bundles. So Steven says, our theory with this one was that if we cut up the pro bundle into 1/20th of the price and the value, and we covered this in a video previously, we heard a ton of feedback that $100 price point bundles were out of reach for many folks. So we were continually testing to see what people would like. That part, that's what I want to focus on. I've been saying this week a little bit, and through these bundles, is they are testing, they are testing, they are testing, they are testing. Right here, they come out and say it. They are testing their bundles. So if you want them to understand where your really price point is, don't feel stretched to go buy these. I always get super frustrated when I see, well, maybe not super frustrated, because everybody should spend however works for them. But from a content creator perspective, I don't like to necessarily endorse these sort of deals, because I try to like to think of the whole spectrum. While content-wise, I might get more views if I buy and do all these offers, I know that for the health of the game specifically and health of the free-to-play community, me buying those offers and showcasing them are not good for that portion of the community. So a lot of times when I see these sort of testing things, I'm not going to go out there and say, look, I bought this mystery bundle or this mystery variant for $10, even though the rest of the offer's trash, and I got this variant. What did you get? Now, maybe if the offers are in a more stable situation, I would do that more consistently, but right now I don't feel like they are. So for that purpose, I'm not doing those bundles. I could buy that $10 offer. I'd love to get a variant, but I'm not going to do it because I don't think it's good for the health of the long-term game, specifically free-to-play players. And the fact that I thought and now know that they're testing these offers to see what people like. Steven goes on to say, we hear the feedback that some of these smaller ones are not hitting the mark. That's good to know. We still have plenty more plans for bundles like Jubilee and the Momoko Magic and higher value offers in the future. So we will see what's happening. They've got plans for things. They know it's not hitting the mark. Obviously, the metrics are probably showing that too. My hope is that they actually get some of these offers to a reasonable price. That 1/20th cost, problem is while boosters might not feel very valuable, they have some value. There is time in getting boosters. You can't just remove the boosters and then take 1/20th of the credits and 1/20th of the cost and be like, yeah, that's a good offer. And no, like, if I'm going to get it in a smaller dose, give me a little bit more. I want to spend, if I'm going to spend $5, I said this in the other video, I want to get 2 to 3 days worth of progression on my credits. That's not a lot for $5, and I'm more willing to spend on it. So I hope they go that route. We'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath. Question about Kitty Pryde doesn't proc collectors is bug or intended. Glenn already answered that's a bug. What is the team's current stance on players waiting until the last second to snap? This is actually an interesting thing because I always, when I played and somebody snapped on me last second, I always felt like I'd get some additional time to decide. But maybe I haven't had this true interaction. Glenn says a snap will always create a consistent time window for the player to make a decision, and we think that's a reasonable amount of time to decide. However, it's fundamentally true that snapping later makes it more likely your opponent has ended their turn, which means they'll only have that window rather than additional time. That's pretty baked into our game's flow, but we are looking at ways we can reduce the incentive, such as unlocking a player who gets snapped to be able to change their play. Nothing decided yet, though. I do think it'd be interesting to unlock them or give them a little bit of additional time so that you can kind of think, well, oh my gosh, they just snapped. Do I still want to do what I want to do, or do I want to change what I'm doing? As long as it doesn't make a crazy amount of extra extended time, I'd be down for it. But I think it is unfair that if somebody's already made their turn, and then they get snapped and they are like, oh my gosh, do I still really want to do this? They might not. Question: how do you sort through data for cards between players who are trying hard, grinding for boosters, or just messing around with ideas? And this is a great question, because I know for me right now, I'm literally just whatever. I'm playing move decks. I'm playing ongoing. I am just having fun. I don't care about anything. Someone will snap, I'll just snap right back. And I'm like, whatever. But that shouldn't, if that's gathering data for them, it's like, ooh, well, I'm just messing around. So like, there's times where I'll have a better hand to play, but I'll play a rock just because I'm like, whatever. I'm just having fun. I don't care. And I didn't get the play that I wanted to. Or maybe I needed 4 cards in a location, so I'm just trying to get the mission. Glenn says, we can slice players in and out of the data based on variables like MMR, games with a specific deck, etc. pretty easily. I'm always looking at different slices to see what consistently true across them. There's no golden data set that is all the answers at all times. Fair enough. I'm not sure there's much to elaborate on there. It would be interesting because it's kind of hard to say. I mean, unless you click a button that just says, I'm just messing around right now. And maybe that's what they add, is you just put something in there. But then how do you know if that's true or not, right? Or maybe you do that for after you hit infinite, but then now they're going to have the infinite rank stuff. So I don't know. I'm just ideas, but I'm not sure any of them make sense. Has the team considered using a technical test server to let players test potential card changers? Glenn says, those have worked well for other games. While I agree it could be a boon for, I think it's supposed to be us too, there are a few reasons he's hesitant, and they range in severity. 1, you do lose cool surprises and excitement, which is very true. It works better for large simultaneous content drops like most card games. Everyone in the test can be working in a sandbox that reflects the live experiences that way, but our content pace makes that harder. Related to 2, running most of a second version of the game live isn't trivial. It would be a major resource draw. I don't think it's justifiable right now, even as the person who would likely benefit the most. And I have seen that with other games where the test servers that they'll make them, and they're either not up, they're not kept up, or things are totally wrong in there. So even when you're playing around in it, it doesn't work right. I mean, I'd rather the game itself be functional and well than have a test server that's pulling resources and their test server is not doing well either, and then therefore it's drawing from the regular game. We'll see if second dinner grows or anything along those lines. I'd love to know if they can actually do that, but again, not at the expense of the actual game. Are there any updated plans making it possible to choose card borders? I would love if they do this. Steven says, we have plans for more customization with borders. Awesome. Love it. Do devs read Reddit feedback, or is it only Discord? Steven says, we read Reddit, Twitter, and other spots too. All right. And that's it. So I think the biggest takeaways for me were obviously where they were testing cards and bugs and all those sort of things, but the testing of the actual offers, that they're continually testing to see what people like. So I like that. I'm glad to see them doing it. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you totally sick of seeing these offers here? I definitely am. I'm not buying them. I'm not going to endorse them for the reasons I mentioned before. I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts about all of this stuff below. If you want to hammer down the like button if any of this was helpful, or if you just want to help the channel grow, I appreciate it. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.